Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shannon, and this is Shannon's Book Nook. And today we are going to be talking about all of the books that I read in October. Let's get into it. So, before we get into the actual books that I read, let's talk about something that is very important that is going on today. Today is November 5th, and in the United States, it is the last day to vote. It is election day. And I did my civic duty and I went and I voted and I got my little sticker. And I hope if you live in the United States, you went and you voted, regardless of who you voted for. I hope you did your civic duty as well. So let's talk about some stats real quick. So in the month of October, I read 13 total books, one physical, three ebooks, one audiobook, and then eight mixed media, meaning I did a tandem read or an immersive read, however you want to classify that. I had one DNF, which was actually quite shocking, which we'll talk about in just a second. Two arcs, got to work on those arcs. I read a total of 5,017 pages, which is a big number. And then for my audiobook time, I listened to 112 minutes, no, 112 hours, 8 minutes, and 11 seconds. Now, my average rating was a little bit higher than last month. Last month was probably my worst month of the year. But this month we got up just a little bit. It is 3.38 average rating. And my most read genre is romance, but it's the close second is fantasy romance or romantasy. So let's talk about that DNF real quick. I DNF'd the final girls support group by Grady Hendrix, which was a complete shock to me. I really enjoyed the Southern Book Club's guide to slaying vampires. I really love that one. I gave that one like 5 stars. I did not like How to Sell a Haunted House as much, but I still had a good time with it. The characters in this book, I can't even, no, the main character is just a little too nutty for me. She's a little too quirky, a little too out there. I got about 47%, almost halfway, and I was like, I can't do it anymore. So I ended up DNFing it. So yeah, let's talk about the books that I actually finished and I rated. Now, when we do this wrap up, I am going to just tell you the book, the rating, and let like a very short either synopsis or why I liked it. So this is going to be hopefully a little quicker than usual. So for my first read in October, I read The Moon, the Stars, and Madame Barova by Ruth Hogan. I ended up giving this a 3 star, and it is historical fiction mixed with magical realism. We have Madame Barova. She is a tarot card reader, a palmist, and a clairvoyant. She is very popular in the town of Brighton, and Billy is moving to Brighton and she is trying to start fresh. She's come off of the end of a pretty messy divorce. She's lost her job at the university. So she's just trying to start fresh. And she meets Madame Barova and their paths cross and some secrets are revealed. This is a dual timeline and dual perspective, so there is a lot going on, but overall, I thought it was a pretty solid read and I gave it 3 stars. Then I read A Cage of Kingdoms by K.F. Breen, which I gave 4 stars to. And this is a fantasy romance. And A Cage of Kingdoms is wrapping up Weston and Aurelia's journey. This is book 6, and you don't necessarily have to read all of the books that come before this, but you definitely have to read book 5 because that's the book that starts Weston and Aurelia's journey. But it definitely would benefit you reading the first 4 books, A Ruin of Roses and that series, because some of those people start to come into book 6 who are featured in the earlier books in the series. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to start this series, start with book 1, which is A Ruin of Roses. And this is a fun, smutty fantasy romance with dragon shifters, wolf shifters, different types of magics going on. So it's a fun series to read, and KF Breen has a good sense of humor, and that comes off in some of her characters. So after A Cage of Kingdoms, I read my book club pick, which was The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. I gave this one a 3 stars. It is a historical fiction with magical realism in there. This book was a very slow paced book. So if you like the slower pace, this might be a book for you. I did enjoy it while I was reading it, but anytime I put it down, I struggled to pick it back up again and just struggled to really finish it. So that's why I'm giving it a 3 star, because I liked it while I was reading it, but once I put it down, it was really hard to get back into the story. The next book I read was The Genius of Judy: How Judy Blume Rewrote Childhood for All of Us by Rachel Bergstein. I gave this 3 stars. This is a nonfiction book. And it's a biography about how Judy Blume um, just rewrote history for all of us. She is a very popular child author. When I was growing up, I loved reading her books when I was in elementary and middle school. She wrote about a lot of things that adults in particular didn't like, in her middle grade and young adult books. She's talking about, periods and, just growing up and sexuality and all that stuff. And at the time, adults didn't like that she was writing those into her kids' books. But this book goes and takes a deep dive into, why she thought it was important to add those topics into her books. And I learned quite a bit, and it was fun to look back as an adult on these books that I read as a child or in middle grade. Um, it was a lot of fun to look back at those. Before I move on to the next book, I did forget to say that I am an Atria partner, and that is who sent me this book. So thank you so much to Atria for sending this book to me to read, enjoy, and share with my followers. Thank you. So now let's talk about the next book that I read, which was The Hanging Tree by Irina Shapiro. This book was gifted to me by one of my friends to read. She gave it to me for my birthday a couple years ago, and I finally got to it. I gave The Hanging Tree 3 stars. It is a historical mystery. We have Nicole, who is one of the main characters. She is at a writing retreat in, I want to say, oh, I don't remember where it takes place. Scotland? I could be wrong. But, anyways, Nicole is a writer and she's at a writing retreat, and she starts to uncover the truth about a centuries old witchcraft trial and its enduring legacy. This is a dual timeline and a dual perspective, because the other perspective we're following is Alice Bailey. She is the woman who has been accused of being a witch, and according to history, she has been hung. So Nicole is kind of wanting to use Alice's story as um, an influence of that into her books. So she starts doing some research and she starts uncovering some dark past of this town and what really happened all those years ago. Now, The Hanging Tree, while I did give it 3 stars, it is a slow paced book. And Nicole has a bit of a romance with one of the other writers in the book. And that I didn't really feel the chemistry between her and the main male character in that timeline. Um, it was hard to believe that they were together because I didn't really feel the chemistry. But I also don't think that the romance was the core part of the plot, which makes me wonder why the author would include that. But I also know that this is book one in a series, so it might have to do with something later on in the series. Do I plan on reading the series? Probably not, because I did struggle to get this book finished. It took me a month to read it because this is the book that I had to read with my eyes. This is my one physical book because there is no audiobook. Well, there is an audiobook, it's on Audible, but I didn't want to pay $25 for it. So, moving on, my next book that I read was Enchanted to Meet You by Meg Cabot. I gave this one 4 stars. It is a paranormal fantasy romance. So we have a plus sized witch named Jessica Gold, and she is the chosen one. And Derek Winters kind of rolls into town on his motorcycle, and he decides he's going to help West Harbor, the town, and he is going to help the chosen one save West Harbor. And sparks kind of fly between Jessica and Derek, and as the two are working together, um, sh- sparks fly, tensions are tight, high, and things begin to happen between the two. It's a cute little fun witchy rom-com that I highly recommend. The next book that I read was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. And I gave this 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. This is a fantasy romance series. It is book 2 in the Crowns of Nyaxia. I loved this duology and I cannot wait for book 3 to come out later this month. It is one of my most anticipated releases for the month of November, and I cannot wait. So, The Crowns of Nyaxia is a fantasy romance series following Rain and Araya. And in the first book, there are trials and they have to win these trials to move on. So, this book also has vampires. So, Araya is a human who has basically been adopted by the vampire king, and lots of drama unfolds in the first book. So I don't want to say too much because I don't want to accidentally spoil anything. So, but if you have not read this series, you are missing out. Be sure to check it out. Then I read Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. This was a 3 star read for me. It is a horror, and we have Mallory, who is fresh out of rehab, and she is the new babysitter for Teddy, who is 5 years old. And Teddy starts drawing some pictures. And as Mallory gets to know Teddy, the pictures begin to get more sinister as the book goes on, and it leads Mallory to believe that Teddy is trying to tell her something with these creepy pictures. So until the truth finally comes out. So I honestly was thinking, based on what some of my friends had told me about this book, I really thought that this book was going to be way creepier than it actually was. In the end, I mean, it was what happened. Messed up? Yes, absolutely. 100% it was messed up. But this wasn't as creepy as I was hoping it would be. So unfortunately, it got 3 stars for me. Then I read The Confidence of Wildflowers by Michaela Smeltzer. Um, I originally gave this book 4 stars after I finished it. You can see the vlog. I did vlog about this book, and I went into a lot more detail about this book and the second book because I did read both of them this month. But after finishing the second book, I went back and instead of giving this 4 stars, it is now 3 stars. So this is a romance. It is an age gap romance because we have Salem, who is 18 years old, and Thayer, who is the hot new neighbor right next door. He is in his 30s. And Thayer has a young son named Forrest, and Salem babysits for Thayer every so often when Thayer's been stuck, has to go to work unexpectedly or whatever. So I enjoyed the first book to a point. I got through it very quickly. It's a quick read, quick, easy read, but it's very clear that Salem is 18. There were some choices that were made and some things that happened, especially in the end of the book, that kind of affected my enjoyment. And then what really brought the rating down for me was when I read The Resurrection of Wildflowers, which is book 2. Um, if you watched my vlogs about these two books, you know I had a lot to say about these two books and how much I disliked this second book in particular. I gave the second book 2 stars, and it brought the enjoyment of the first book down to a 3 star because in the second book things were not discussed. The second book is we it takes place 6 years in the future, and based on the things that happened at the end of the first book, there were conversations that needed to be have had by Thayer and Salem that never take place. And that right there, it just made me mad. And it just tells me all that I need to know about the fact that the author wanted to include something that was traumatic and would cause the characters grief, but didn't know how to properly handle it in a book. And I know this is a fictional world, but those conversations for their relationship to work in the real world, those conversations needed to have happened. Anyways, if you want more information, you can always go check out my vlogs. For it's in book in my Spookoplathon vlog 1 and the second one. Up next, I have The Wren in the Holly Library by K.A. Lindy. I gave this 3.5 stars. This is a fantasy romance, and we have Kierce, who is a thief, and she must go into a home to get an item that her client wants. But what she doesn't know is that in this home lives a monster because monsters are now public. And yeah, the house that she has to break into is a monster's home. This book started out good. It was a solid read for me, but the pacing was an issue for me. So starts out really good, solid, but the build up, there just I know because it's book 1 in a series, we have to get the world building down, which the author did really well, but you expect the pace to kind of start to pick up about halfway through, and it just never, for me, never really picked up. So I was kind of disappointed with that. Will I read the next book? Potentially. Probably. And then my next to last book for the month of October was Role Playing by Kathy Yardley. I gave this a 3 stars, and it is a romance. And we have Maggie, who is 48 years old, and Aiden, who is 50 years old. Aiden is demisexual, which is a part of the ace spectrum, which is asexuality. I loved that this featured an older couple. They are also gamers, and that's kind of how they meet. But the pace of this book dragged. Like, the pace doesn't really start to pick up until like towards the end, at like 70%. It dragged. I needed more to be happening. There was just a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversation, a lot of back and forth, and it wasn't that interesting to keep having those conversations. But I did love that this features a asexual main male character, because that's how I identify. I identify as demisexual, and I also loved that this features an older couple. Last but definitely not least, we have my final read of the month, which is also my only 5 star read. We have Lights Out by Navessa Allen. I absolutely loved this book. We have a dark romance. If you enjoyed Butcher and Blackbird, you are probably going to love this. Um, I was in the bookstore and I opened it up and I saw all the trigger warnings, and I said, say less, because we have a list of trigger warnings. So, your girl had to buy it, and I freaking loved it. We have Allie, who is a trauma nurse, and she loves watching Thirst Trap when on her downtime. She loves shirtless, masked men, and she loves one guy in particular. What she doesn't know is that this guy has his eye on her too, because she comments on every one of his videos and he notices. And he's a bit of a tech geek, and he finds her. And everything that goes after this is pretty dark, but I loved every second of it. I don't know what that says about me, but yeah, favorite of the month. Loved it. Highly recommend if you love funny books, number one, and dark books. Because even though this is funny and dark, I ate it up. So there you have it. These are the books that I read this month. I read 13 of them. Obviously, this is not all of them, but it's most of them. And I had a pretty good month. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you stuck around for this long, don't forget to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. If you want to check me out on any of my other social medias, I have links down in the description for my Instagram and my Goodreads, as well as my Pango storefront, because I do have quite a few books for sale if you would like to check that out. If you would like to leave me a comment to let me know you were here, leave me a flower emoji. No, leave me a skull emoji for my favorite book of the month. Leave me a skull emoji. And I will see you next time. Bye, y'all.